It's 3 a.m. You're in a helium headspace. It's Monday, September 22nd, 2025. It is the 30th anniversary of the opening night of Seven, directed by David Fincher, starring a young Brad Pitt, Kevin Spacey, Gwyneth Paltrow, Arlie Ermey, and Morgan Freeman, who as Detective Somerset narrates the film's final two lines. Ernest Hemingway once wrote, "The world is a fine place and worth fighting for." I agree with the second part. Adjusted for inflation, it made $29.5 million its opening weekend and has since gone on to make $696 million over its lifetime. On this Monday, the autumnal equinox arrives, the moment when day and night balance out, each standing on equal footing before the long slide into winter begins. Humans have been marking this cosmic checkpoint for thousands of years. The ancient Egyptians timed the flooding of the Nile in part by the equinox, while the Mayans aligned temples so the play of sunlight would trace a serpent's shadow down the pyramid of El Castillo at Chichen Itza. In Greece, the equinox was tied to the myth of Persephone's descent into the underworld, signaling the end of harvest and the lean months ahead. Across the globe, harvest festivals, moon viewing gatherings, and rituals of balance and thanksgiving have clustered around this day. What happens in the sky is simple. Earth's tilted axis lines up so that the sun crosses the celestial equator. But the meaning people have found in that balance between light and dark, fullness and scarcity, summer's bounty and winter's austerity, endures as anything but simple. Here in the United States this year, it will be marked at precisely 12:19 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Maurice Blanchot, born in France on this day in 1907, is one of those figures whose work runs deep beneath the surface of modern thought, shaping the ground even if you never see the name in the headlines. A writer, critic, and philosopher, he wrote obsessively about death, silence, and the limits of language, what he sometimes called the outside, that space beyond meaning where words themselves falter. His ideas resonated powerfully with later thinkers like Jacques Derrida, Gilles Deleuze, and Michel Foucault, who treated Blanchot not as a master to follow, but as a companion in unsettling established certainties. Blanchot's prose is notoriously difficult, often circling around its subjects rather than pinning them down, but that difficulty was the point. He was trying to show that thought itself must wrestle with what cannot be captured or neatly explained. To read him is less like listening to an argument than like standing on the edge of a cliff and realizing how much space there is below. Adi Ophir, born in Israel in 1951, is a political philosopher and critical theorist whose work has wrestled with some of the darkest and most persistent features of modern life. He has examined how power is exercised not only through laws or leaders, but also through the management of disasters, violence, and everyday suffering, what he calls the politics of catastrophes. Ophir is also known for his investigations into political theology, exploring how secular states often inherit and repurpose religious structures of authority and judgment. A longtime critic of Israeli policies toward Palestinians, his scholarship blends moral urgency with rigorous analysis, forcing readers to look squarely at how institutions justify harm and distribute vulnerability. His ideas remind us that catastrophe is not only natural or accidental, it is sometimes organized, administered, and sustained by human efforts at control. Ursula King was born today in 1938 in Germany. She was a scholar who spent her career at the crossroads of theology, philosophy of religion, and cultural studies. She is best known for her work on gender and religion, bringing feminist thought into dialogue with traditions that had too often overlooked women's voices. King was also a leading interpreter of Pierre de Chardin, the French Jesuit whose blend of science, mysticism, and evolutionary theory she helped introduce to wider audiences. Her scholarship pressed the point that religion is not just a system of beliefs, but a living force that shapes human development, social structures, and the struggle for justice. By pushing theologians to consider gender and global perspectives, she reminded both academics and lay readers that religion's power lies not in tradition alone, but in grappling with applying those traditions to our time. In 1904, the American physicist Robert W. Wood played the role of spoiler in one of science's stranger episodes, The Rise and Fall of N-rays. For several years, a French physicist, René Blandelot, had claimed to discover a new form of radiation, supposedly emitted by everything from metals to human bodies. Laboratories across Europe briefly piled in with dozens of papers reporting faint but promising results. But when Wood visited Blandelot's lab, he did something simple. He quietly removed a critical prism from the experiment while Blandelot still insisted he could see the N-rays. The revelation was decisive. There were no rays, only wishful thinking. Wood's exposure brought an abrupt end to what has since been remembered as a classic case of pathological science where belief and reputation carried experiments further than reality ever could. Erich von Stroheim was born on this day in 1885. He was one of the great iconoclasts of early Hollywood, an Austrian immigrant who styled himself as an aristocrat and earned a reputation as both a genius and a tyrant on set. His most enduring work, Greed, was originally a 9-hour adaptation of Frank Norris's novel McTeague, which he insisted be filmed largely on real locations, rare for the silent era. The studio cut it down to just over 2 hours, but even in mutilated form it is regarded as a landmark of realism and ambition. Stroheim himself often acted, playing cold-eyed officers or villains, and his aura of severity carried over into his directing style, where he demanded authenticity at any cost. Though his career behind the camera was effectively derailed by his clashes with producers, his legend has only grown. A man remembered for pursuing truth in film so obsessively that the system turned its back on him. Nick Cave was born today in 1957. He's carved out a reputation as one of Australia's most distinctive cultural exports, straddling the line between rock musician, novelist, and screenwriter. As frontman of the Bad Seeds, his music has long been marked by its dark storytelling and biblical intensity, traits that carried over into his first novel in 1989, And the Ass Saw the Angel, a southern gothic tale steeped in violence and redemption. Cave also turned his storytelling to screenwriting, penning the 2000 film The Proposition, a brutal Australian western directed by John Hillcoat, which critics praised for its stark poetry and moral complexity. His career reflects a restless creative spirit, forever seeking out new forms of expression while holding fast to his fascination with myth, faith, and the uneasy territory between beauty and brutality. And those are some of the things humans have managed to do over the years. Smile more, subscribe, and reach out on social media.